In front of me, I have 3 different PS5 controllers, a standard PlayStation 5 controller, the new DualSense Edge, and a custom Pro controller from Controller Mods AU. So, which one is the best? We're about to find out. For today's video, we're going to be comparing the pros and cons between the PS5 DualSense Edge and the custom controller built out from Controller Mods AU. And we'll only use the standard PS5 controller for reference, just as an extra comparison. Now, before I dive into it, I'd like to clarify that I've been using the custom controllers from Controller Mods AU for quite some time now, but I'm going to do my best to keep my bias completely out of it. And I'm also a PC gamer, so I'll be comparing these controllers on how they perform on PC and not PlayStation 5. So to start off, let's talk about the design. The first thing to note is the DualSense Edge is only available in one design, and it kind of looks the exact same as a standard PS5 controller, except that it has black buttons, a unique groove on the touchpad which looks very cool, and a black gloss finish on the bottom half of the controller that I don't particularly like. Whereas on the other hand, with Controller Mods AU, you have a limitless amount of customization options. And when I say limitless, I really mean that. For example, I have 5 different controllers with them, all with different custom designs. This one right here is a fan favorite because of the nostalgic PlayStation 1 controller design. This one is definitely my favorite one to have on display because of the unique Damascus pattern. And this last one right here is the absolute holy grail because it's my very own custom controller, which still blows my mind that you're able to purchase this. Aside from my collection, they've completed thousands of different custom designs, which is actually available upon customer requests, which is crazy within itself because you can't really get that service anywhere. But this is purely aesthetics. How do these actually perform? Let's first take a look at the trigger system. The DualSense Edge has introduced these trigger stoppers, which gives you 3 different set options: long, medium, and short. And what these do in simple terms is just shorten the range of your trigger. And the reason why that's actually beneficial is because in a short setting, it will require you to press your trigger down less amount of time in order to get a reaction in game, therefore having a faster response time. This short setting is going to be most beneficial in games like Call of Duty or any FPS shooter where you want to have the fastest response time possible. And the reason why it's really nice to have this setting on your controller is because if you play different games like a racing game where you want to have more control over your accelerator, it would be massively beneficial to have a longer trigger like the standard PS5 controller, therefore you have a little bit more control over your throttle. But in a competitive scene, the short trigger on the DualSense does not compare to the mouse click triggers that you receive on a Controller Mods AU controller. And yes, when I say mouse click triggers, they act the exact same way that a click would work on a mouse. When I match these two up side by side, you can see the difference in the range of the triggers, which might not seem like a lot, but in competitive gaming, every millisecond counts, and this can make a dramatic difference. The AU Mods controllers also offer the same feature on the bumpers, which I don't think make anywhere near as much of a dramatic effect as the triggers do, but it's definitely nice having the consistency through them both. Now onto the buttons on the face of the controller, and for the DualSense Edge, it's the exact same as the standard PS5 controller, which for majority of my AU Mods controllers, I also have the standard buttons, just with some aesthetic customization. But they do have some options that can be extremely advantageous. For example, the directional buttons. On this PS5 controller, the directional buttons are all connected. When I move up, the bottom arrow will also move with it. Essentially, it's just one piece. But with independent buttons, there are 4 individual buttons, which I can see being beneficial in certain games where looting might be required or you might have to use these directional buttons more often. But for me in Call of Duty, I only use it for the ping system, so it's not really important at all. And the other option that you can add is the action buttons on the right side of the controller can also be mouse clicks, but I don't see any real benefit in this and I would not be able to justify the extra cost. Moving down to the thumbsticks, and both controllers have advantages against each other. We'll start off with the feature they both have, and that's interchangeable thumbsticks. This gives you the option to have shorter and longer thumbsticks, which I really like having a long thumbstick on my right side so I have more control over my aim, and a short thumbstick on my left side because I don't think it's necessary to have 2 long sticks. I personally prefer concave over dome thumbsticks, so I don't like the fact that the DualSense Edge hasn't offered a longer concave option. I just find that I slip more often with the dome design, and that's just personal preference, but I'm sure some people would prefer the traditional PlayStation feel. The next thing that I found difficult to go back to on the DualSense controller was not having thumbstick tension. And it might not seem like it makes a difference, but I think this is the biggest difference between having better control over your aim. More resistance against your right thumb gives you so much more control over your aim, and you don't truly realize how much better it is until you go back to a standard controller. But there is one major issue with all controllers that the DualSense Edge was brilliant enough to take into account for, and that is something that we all know as stick drift. Unfortunately, it's inevitable. With the wear and tear of almost every controller, at some point in its lifespan, it will start to experience stick drift. Although PlayStation thought about this and allowed you to buy the individual part and replace the whole thumbstick component yourself. Whereas up until now with other controllers, when you came across this issue, you either had to send it in for repair or just replace the whole controller itself, which if you didn't have a spare controller could mean that you were without that controller for quite some time. Now with that being said, if I did have a DualSense Edge, I would also purchase a couple Edge Stick modules just to be able to have them readily available if they needed to be replaced. And with that proactive mentality on the contrary, you would need to purchase a second controller with AU mods in order to have an immediate replacement if you did encounter this issue. So definitely in that particular field, it's a win for the PlayStation 5 Edge. But if you're fortunate enough like me and have multiple controllers, you'll never have this issue. And up until now, I've been pretty lucky with smooth sailing. Next up are the back buttons, and I must say the DualSense Edge really impressed me. I've felt the paddles on the back of a SCUF controller, and I must say the DualSense Edge is miles ahead. And also, having previously switched from back paddles to buttons, I thought once I went buttons, I wouldn't be able to go back. But holding this PS5 DualSense Edge, it felt comfortable almost immediately. Now for the AU Mods controllers, they don't offer paddles, but they do offer mushroom buttons, which I think are by far the best. These also operate just like mouse clicks, which is perfectly suited for the rest of the controller, and the overall feel is amazing. And yes, both controllers offer remappable buttons, so you can program any function to the back buttons you want. Now for the final and probably one of the most underrated parts of a controller, and that is the grip. I'm actually so surprised that the DualSense Edge didn't implement a proper grip for their controller. I can feel almost no difference between the standard PS5 controller and the DualSense Edge, whereas Controller Mods AU offers a soft touch feel over the whole controller, which absolutely feels amazing on the hands, and a high performance grip on the rear side if you like that rougher grip. The one thing that the DualSense Edge does have over the AU Mods controllers is that it comes in a really nice case with a durable charging cable. Another thing worth mentioning is how heavy the DualSense Edge is. It's a lot heavier than a standard controller compared to the AU Mods version, which is a lot lighter than a standard controller. So the difference between the two is night and day. Now some people might prefer it heavier because it may feel more durable, but personally I would hate to go through longer gaming sessions with a controller that heavy. And now onto the final subject, which is possibly one of the most important deciding factors, and that is the price point. The PS5 DualSense Edge is priced at $339, and I would almost certainly add the DualSense Edge Stick module, which is an extra $34. Whereas at Controller Mods AU, the price ranges are so far apart. To start off with, they actually offer a service where you can send in your own PS5 controller, so if you already have one, you can start the customization off at $33, which could save you a lot of money. But for the sake of this explanation, with the new controller, you start off your customization at $154. And if you were to customize the controller the exact same way that I've customized this one, it would set you back $360. And fortunately for you, you can use code IP to save 5% off any controller off their website, which drives the price down a little and it makes it line up with the PS5 DualSense Edge. So that brings the ultimate question, which one is actually the best? And I think it's a simple answer. If you're playing FPS shooters or want to be playing anything competitive, the only controller you should be going with is a controller from Controller Mods AU or any custom controller that has these types of features. Digital triggers and bumpers, right thumbstick tension, interchangeable thumbsticks, and the back buttons are a major difference compared to a standard controller. Now, if you're wanting to go into a more immersive experience playing God of War, Harry Potter, or the like, then don't even bother going for a DualSense Edge. Just buy a standard PS5 controller. I can't justify the price point of a DualSense Edge, where the only real benefit is having trigger stoppers, which really doesn't make a difference in an immersive experience game like God of War. As for the haptic feedback and the vibration to make you feel like you're in the game, you're getting the exact same experience from a PS5 controller for a third of the price. So ultimately, if you're only going to buy this for the convenience of being able to change out your thumbstick so you don't have stick drift, well, you might as well buy 3 controllers. Therefore, you have 3 times the chance of copying stick drift. The only way that I could explain somebody buying this was if they're both competing and also playing some games that are more immersive where they do want the standard PS5 controller. But in my opinion, I would go with the custom controller to have the most competitive gaming controller possible, and also a standard PS5 controller over having this. I only really play competitive anyway, so I'm pretty much always using these. I think these are the best, and ultimately I do practice what I preach because I use these every single night. If this video has helped you decide on what controller you should buy next, then please do drop the video a like. It helps the channel a lot. And also please consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. And if you want to check me out on any of my other social channels, I got the link at the top of my description. And if you happen to be watching this far into the video, make sure you comment down GOATed so I know who the true GOATs are. That's all from me. May the COD gods are with you. I'll see you in the next vid. Cheers.